Thank you, Stephen. I am so excited for this panel. We're talking about innovations and safety. The reason why I am so excited, as you all know, technology is moving like the speed of light. And I do think that innovations in safety needs to move fast, but not, keyword, not break things. And so my panelists here, we're focused in areas where we can make sure we're focused on creating innovative safety tools, policies, and education that are thoughtful and will hopefully lead us into a much more positive, empowered, and I look around to Elizabeth, and I hate that word too, it's way overused. I'm Tami Bhaumik. I'm the VP of Civility at Roblox and also chair of FOSI. I'll give you a brief rundown. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with Roblox, Roblox is a technology platform that allows millions of young people, people of all ages, to be able to create experiences and publish it on our platform. We also have a civility initiative, and what that civility initiative is all about is educating and empowering and bringing the generations together. And how we do that is by developing global partnerships with safety NGOs, researchers, academics, to make sure that we're pulling together all of evidence-based research to inform our decision-making into our product development, as well as creating materials and education for the people who are on our platform, as well as parents. We also partner with other industry players as well. I want to thank Mindy. Actually, we're working very closely with Google right now to amplify their Be Internet Awesome campaign, which also focuses in on education. But instead of having it on paper and just PDFs that very often parents don't read, we are actually creating a beautiful experience within Roblox that is immersive, and people can go in and actually be involved. So that's one area of innovation in the space. But before I get too deep into Roblox, I'd like to spend a little bit of time with our panelists. I'm going to ask each one of you to introduce yourselves and share a little bit about your background and what you do. So Mindy, we'll start with you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mindy Brooks, and I lead the kids and family work here at Google. My background is actually, I'm a researcher by trade, a child development psychologist, and I came into tech at the boom of touch devices and how do we go about creating products for our youngest users, thinking about their developmental needs and stages, and then making sure we're taking that into consideration as we are developing and engaging with the newest technologies. So that's a little bit of my background, and excited to be here.
Thank you. Luc?
Morning, everybody. And it's a pleasure to be back at FOSI. I've been on the circuit for the last 20 years doing public policy, a lot of work in trust and safety. I'm an ex-Googler, an ex-Facebooker, and I've spent the last decade working with the video games industry. And I'm from KID, which is a relatively new company. And I'm so optimistic for the future, actually. We often talk about the dangers of technologies, but actually I think the technologies can be incredibly useful because we've built technology that we believe will make it possible for any kid or any user anywhere in the world to get into a game and have that age-appropriate experience. We were talking about how bans don't work, taking devices away. We have technology to help make any online experience age-appropriate and do that with parents and with their consent. So excited to be able to talk about that more shortly.
Hi folks, David Hunter. I run our trust and safety business at Resolver. That will be a new name to most of you. We were formerly CRISP or CRISP Thinking. We're a company that have been around in the UK since 2005, so nearly 20 years now. We were founded to build technology to deal with child safety risks and create safe online environments for children across the world. Today we build moderation solutions, trust and safety solutions, and intelligence solutions for platforms of all shapes and sizes. We want to let people know where they're at risk. We want to help platforms get safer. We want to protect platforms from the widest range of risks. If you have more time outside, we can share more information. But we are 300 people of a 600-person business, of a 6,000-person business, now as part of Kroll, always thinking about the next threat, the next problem. And as we talk about innovation, we'll talk about how we've been at the forefront of innovation since 2005. When our founder was at these types of sessions nearly 20 years ago, nobody was talking about this thing. Nobody was talking about the problem. 15 years later, they were then saying to him, oh, you've thought of a really good idea at the right time. And he would say, well, come back and talk to me in the 2000s when this was going on. So a whole range of experience, and yeah, happy to be part of the panel.
Thank you. Glenn.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Glenn Millard from Amazon. So I've been a digital product and commercial lead for about 15 years now, growing and developing businesses at Vodafone, Heineken, and Amazon. So I actually run Amazon Kids. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Amazon Kids, but it's a walled garden for under 13-year-olds to safely enjoy digital content on Amazon devices. With no open access to the internet, to social media, or user-generated content, when it's fully customizable by parents. So either they can choose to curate the experience by adding content in that they purchase for their child, or it can be fully curated by us through our digital content subscription service that we call Kids Plus, which has thousands of age-appropriate, ad-free videos, apps and games, ebooks, audiobooks, Alexa skills, kids radio, and much, much more. And I'm also the father of my harshest critics, which is my two young daughters, Mayro and Della. So fantastic to be here and excited to learn more about this very important space today.
We are all held higher standards given our kids, right? So I would have to say that's definitely a motivating factor. When it comes to innovation, I would love for you to all to share what your companies are doing in the face of some of the onslaught of AI, some of the things that are going on right now. I know that Roblox, we prioritize safety and civility beyond all else. In fact, our product and engineering organizations for safety are our largest teams. So it is an all-out effort. So please, can you share, Mindy?
Sure. So at Google, we think about it across 3 pillars: protect, respect, empower. So on the protect side, we're really leaning into applying our leading state-of-the-art CSAM detections and applying that with generative AI to help us all scale at detecting and removing the most harmful and egregious content online. So that is one big class of area that we're working to innovate in and move as quickly and safely as possible, and utilizing the technology in that way. The second area would be in what we call our respect pillar. So that's everything from our parental controls and making sure we're expanding that in a way that through Family Link and making it available around the world in new and exciting ways. And then last and definitely not least, and empowering kids. I know empowering is a big word today, apparently. So about empowering kids, making sure they can use the best of technology. We've been working to responsibly launch Gemini, our generative AI technology for teenagers, and we've started to slowly roll that out in partnership with academics around the world, some here in France as well, working to do that in a safe and thoughtful way that respects teens' growing sense of agency, but also in a way that applies protections that we know are needed for that space. So that's a number of big areas that we've been working on and are actively making sure that we are balancing both the protections as well as empowering.
Great. Luke?
So we've been looking at a range of the problems facing parents, games companies, and regulators as well, where you might have a small company that suddenly has a worldwide audience of people of different ages. You might be able to chat to people, you might be able to buy things, and with that comes a whole host of regulation you're supposed to comply with globally, but you're a small company, how could you do that? Even large companies struggle to do that. And for parents, you know, I've got 2 boys, 7 and 9, and setting up the parental controls on their, I'm going to try and do this all without mentioning any brands, on their tablet, I've had to set up 3 different email accounts for them because it was required, one by the device, one by the game, and then one by another service that I'm using parental controls on. Like, why does my 7-year-old have 3 email addresses? It's absolutely bonkers. And so then for regulators, they want to have the company that may be based in the US or Estonia or Singapore complying with French law. We'll pick French law because we're here. But how does that company get consent to provide the service? And how does the parent know that that's a good idea to give that? And how do I do it? Which device do I do it on? Which service do I use? And over, we've developed an approach which is the internet was there wide open for everybody, and actually we've been putting these blockers in place and trying to make a service safer. And actually going back to this idea of safer by design, we need to build safe products rather than try to make products safer. And I think that's what everyone here is really trying to do, is take that safer by design principle. So we have a global database of all the rules and regulations that apply to a kid or a teen playing a game for 200 plus jurisdictions. And based on the IP of that user, they'll get a tailored game experience based on their age and the jurisdiction that they're in. And then we have a process that recognizes the approved method by the local regulators on how do you identify that this is a parent, you verify that that's their child. And the nice thing, or the reason I'm so optimistic is that once you do it once with us, we could apply that across any other service, and the parent only needs one set of parental controls across all services. So I'm not dealing with, my kids play on the Switch, on my phone, on their own tablets. I mentioned a Switch. That's okay. Failed. One strike. And so again, we're just setting up more layers to keep kids out. And to steal an analogy from Mike, which I heard a couple of weeks ago, is, actually we want to get kids in. We take our kid from, toddling around and you hold their hand very closely to they're at the park and they want a little bit of autonomy, so you just keep out the corner of their eye, hey, you're right, yep, good, all right, and then you continue having your natter. We can do that digitally by involving the parents, by giving the kids the power also to get into services, to get onto services and not block them out. We know, there's data to show this, that kids with access to the internet and to services have a better access to protection. They are safer in their real life by having digital access. And that is counterintuitive to so much that we hear about at trust and safety conferences. We always hear about the worst things, but they have access to services, they have access to people, they have access to content and access to education. We should be building services to get kids in and get them in safely and get them in an age-appropriate experience. And that's what our technology is for. Of course, we have stuff for the services, it's APIs and databases, but for parents to be able to manage their kids' game experience as well and do it with confidence as well. Sorry, I've rambled a little bit.
Thank you. David.
So why innovation really is a thing that is always in our minds is that the space that we're playing in is constantly evolving. The bad actors that we care about are using innovation themselves, whether they think about it as innovation or not, to do the things they're wanting to do in online environments. Access children, share material, connect with each other where they don't want to be detected. So we're always innovating in terms of how we're detecting harmful behaviors, harmful content, harmful connections across platforms. A lot of the time, the innovation is an evolution of things that we've already built. Sometimes it's brand new techniques and technologies that come in. Obviously, at the moment, AI, generative AI is the buzzword probably of these sessions. But using whatever we can, thinking about things from a slightly sideways perspective about how can we innovate our solution to find the things we're wanting to find. If anybody's from a company or an organization or a group that's tried to detect maybe grooming in online environments, it's where we started nearly 20 years ago. The thing most people, when they come and talk to us, when they realize we have something, will say, oh, we've been trying to build this, we realize that there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution for these things, and we've spent loads of money building a model that doesn't actually work for anybody and won't work. So actually there's constant innovation going on about how can we create something that allows people to use a solution for their environment I use the term recipes of behavior. What we want to do is we want to build an engine that allow people to configure behaviors as a recipe to say, these 3 building blocks together in this type of form on our platform will help us spot the behavior, and on another platform will be slightly different. If we can build that and we can allow those things to be tweaked and configured for different environments, then this will work. I think if anybody's coming out with things where they say, we have a new innovation that is a silver bullet that solves all of these problems, it generally is not the case. So we're constantly innovating, we are constantly assessing bad actor behavior so that we can counter it, but will we finish? Is this going to be innovation that means the job is now done? Probably not. This is going to be a constant cat and mouse game of unfortunately dealing with people that have bad intent and will continue to try and do it on which one of the many, many platforms or environments that exists.
Yeah, I think, and I also, just to reemphasize your point, innovation is iterative by nature. So I think that we're all learning together, and which is one of the reasons why doing this together is so important. Glenn.
Yeah, so at Amazon Kids, our focus is really trust and safety by design, and we carry that through to kind of 3 key aspects. The first is what I talked about earlier, which is Amazon Kids. That's the walled garden with our parental controls. We then have Amazon Kids Plus, which is our digital content subscription service. And there it's really about, curating the content, making sure that we're bringing in age-appropriate content for children of all ages. And we actually have individuals that check every single piece of content to make sure it's appropriate. It doesn't have any kind of links to social media or any kind of harmful content online. And then we have our third kind of key pillar, which is our kids' devices. So I don't know if everyone's familiar with those, but we have a Fire Kids tablet for 3 to 7-year-olds. We have our Fire Kids Pro tablet for 6+. Hopefully that's what your kids are using. We have our Echo Dot Kids, our Kindle Kids device, so for avid readers out there. And we have finally our Echo Show device, which is our screened Alexa device. And we work very closely with parents. We run beta groups for all of the features that we launch, all the new products and features we launch. We test with parents, we talk to parents. And we have to really understand that there's this huge spectrum of parental styles, as you can imagine, right the way from very, very permissive to all the way for very, very protective. And we want to give parents the tools that they have to be able to monitor the experience in the way that they want to and customize that experience how they want to. And that can be things like time limits. It can be things like educational goals. Do they want their children to read a book for 30 minutes before they access a game or watch a video? Do they want to kind of add and remove content? Because not all the content that we have curated, it might be appropriate for that particular family or parenting style. And so we really want to kind of put the control in the hands of the parents. But also help them as well, because it can be daunting. That's why it's very daunting for parents to actually go and research what is the right content. And so that's where Amazon Kids Plus does play that role, because we are parents ourselves in the Amazon Kids team, and so we really have carefully selected that content. So, but always work to do. We're continually iterating with that. We're launching new features. I'm super excited about what AI can do there as well. I'm sure we're going to talk about that a lot more today.
So I know that Roblox spends a tremendous amount of time and money on iterating and developing resources for parents, like you all do. And it is like a drip of water in an ocean in terms of trying to get the word out to parents to educate them. Parents are busy. I'm a parent, I'm incredibly busy. And it is very, very difficult to get the attention. Is there any cool thing that your companies are doing or that you're doing specifically in your roles that's innovative and cool in terms of amplifying the parental controls that you're developing within your organization? Mindy, want to take it first?
Yes, so lots of different ideas. I think this goes back to the heart of iteration, because trying to reach parents is difficult. So one way we are doing this through Family Link is making sure that we are making search results prominent. So if a parent searches for parental controls, that they have a great plethora of options available right there in that Google search. So that's one way that we're doing that. Other ways that I'm very passionate about from a product perspective is in context moments matter. It matters for kids and learning. It also matters for parents. So when they're in a product going through something, those learning moments actually teach the most versus going to another website, having to research it, reading those materials. So we're looking at ways to embed notices, privacy checkups, those sorts of things for parents within the product throughout all of our Google services, as well as for kids and teens to do it in a way that's responsible and written in a way that they understand. So those are two big areas in which we're looking at how do we reach them, and then in addition, partnerships with Be Internet Awesome, which is the material that you mentioned earlier, in schools, at homes around the world, and really working for new innovative ideas and collaborating in how we distribute those materials out to parents and teens.
And Be Internet Awesome on Roblox will be coming out soon.
There you go. Yes. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Luke, do you have any thoughts on it?
Sure. It's a really important part of what we do is working with our partners, with our clients. So they are the ones who are mostly parent-facing and child-facing. So it's their service which is configured based on our knowledge of permissions. And so the cool thing about that is we work with games companies, and games companies really want to have happy customers. So they're really invested in making sure that they get good messages out to parents. And we do have our parent portal. And on there, of course, we have expert advice, probably written by people in this room, some of them. I'm going to cheat a little bit and say watch this space, because we have some really cool innovations coming for our family portal later in the year.
We will watch that
sorry.
space.
So in a similar sense, our customers have the interface with their users and their parents. It's about thinking about the actions that a lot of those environments take that allow education and awareness rather than users escalating to a point where they need to be removed or banned from a platform. Where nudges and interventions can be put in place, then somebody can know that they've done something wrong or that they're at risk. But answering the question as a parent, so I have two boys, 5 and 9, so we can somebody can probably tell me at what age they stop wrestling and shouting, and because it's not yet. Not yet. And actually, people have probably heard me say this a few times. It can be an awkward conversation that if you go for dinner with other parents and you start talking about what you do, and people say, oh, what kind of things do you see? You're often met with a, please stop talking, go and talk about the football or talk about something else. Because it is still a difficult conversation, a conversation people don't want to have, to understand that, yeah, the thing that you're giving your children could well be putting them at risk, or the internet contains harmful content and harmful users that they could well be presented with. And it is still, from a wider product perspective, kind of unsexy for people to say, our product probably contains bad guys, or our product probably contains harmful content. Most things that we get given in the world come with kind of safety first, and a lot of the time environments come with safety available, but not necessarily safety on. So it isn't, in my experience, a conversation that a lot of parents are that easy in having. It often becomes more of a struggle, which is why solutions like yours can hopefully make it easy for people to use. Because I know that even people in this space find it difficult. I have found it difficult on many environments to find safety settings. So if I'm struggling, then it really isn't something that most people are going to use. And therefore, to the point somebody made earlier, if one kid's device is safe, but 4 others in the room that they're playing in isn't, then it's going to be a problem.
Yes, I think somewhat related to the question, I think one of the things where I think we need innovation in Amazon Kids particularly is actually driving awareness amongst parents of the parental tools that we have. So actually we had a really surprising bit of research about a month ago where we went out to our customers to talk about, our parent dashboard, it's called, our parental controls, and actually less than 50% were even aware that we actually have that service available, which was really surprising to us. So we actually need to do a lot more innovation trying to get parents to understand that we have these amazing tools that they can use to customize the experience. And so we're trying to do that through our out-of-box experience for our kids' devices. As they go through that setup, is making it very clear that they can download and use our parent dashboard app or through a web browser or on their mobile or however else. And then we also found in some research we did, some other research we did this year as well, that there is this huge amount, as we all know, anxiety and guilt amongst parents about screen time or our kids getting access to inappropriate content. And they all talk about the video sharing platforms and about how they're really cautious about their kids using them. But what they weren't aware of is that there are these incredible parental controls out there that does allow them to monitor and filter that experience for their kids, but they're just not aware of it. And that was universal across the focus group that we had in the UK and in Germany. Completely universal, lot of kind of fear about it, but not really understanding that they actually have the power to be able to monitor and filter and help their kids use it sensibly. And so I think we need to do a much better job of that.
Agreed. So I'm going to turn the topic from parents to teens. So last year, Roblox and the Digital Wellness Lab associated with Boston Children's Hospital convened 100 thought leaders from around the world to work on a hypothesis. In 5 to 10 years, the online world can be safer and more civil than in real life. If we were to make that a reality, what would need to happen in technology innovation, policy, and education and awareness? What came out of these sessions, of these thought leaders we had many, many industry players. We had competitors sitting next to competitors. We had researchers sitting next to other academic researchers, really leaning in on this. The one resounding thing that came out of the research and on all of the discussions, teen voice. Include teen voice meaningfully throughout all of the product decisions that are made. And so with that, Roblox actually has started to really focus on integrating youth meaningfully through councils, tapping into our partnership, teen councils, and the development of our own. I know many of our industry players have also started to reach out and do the same things. And when it comes to teens, I would love for you all to talk about it from their perspective and what your companies are doing.
Well, speaking to kids is my passion space because that's my background. So from the start, we have actively involved not only teens, but also young children as well in our research to make sure we are hearing from them. But I actually just spent time with some focus groups. I know Jen led, she's in the room here, with teens around the world, and I sat in on all of those just to listen. And what we're hearing is they want help with their well-being, and they have ideas. They had Figma mocks ready to go for the discussions. I was like, we should hire you. That's incredible. But they had very good ideas on how they go about managing their screen time, how they go about limiting the types of advertisements that they see. They have actual tactical practices that they do that are very, very sophisticated, much more than myself. And I work at a tech company, and they go about this in a way that is so thoughtful, and I think we need to then be applying that into the types of controls we bake in with safety by design from the very start. So that's one area that I've been very actively listening in, is like, how do they go about doing this in their regular, everyday life? And then how do we go about building products that support them to take that burden off of them in a way that can best support them? So that's one big area that we've been leaning in.
That's great.
I think it's a really great question, because it does presuppose that we know who the kids are on our services, and I think that's a really big problem. And we've heard that parental controls are widely available. I think it's even mandatory here that new devices have to be sold with some access to parental controls in France. I'm sure that for every company, they've thought about it in a thoughtful, meaningful way for their particular device or their particular service. But as I explained earlier, I had to go through 3 different sets of controls and set up 3 different accounts to use one game, one rather fantastic game, so I was happy to go through the pain of doing it. But setting up my kids' tablets, didn't say which one, I've got two boys. It took me the whole day of them, and them nagging me, going, have you done it yet? Have you done it yet? Can I get onto... yet. So that's an issue, and so even those parents who are vested simply go, oh, do you know what? I'm just going to let you have. Effectively, I'll just go for it. Oh, just use my account. Just go for it. But talk to me if you find a problem. But just go for it. And so we can help companies identify who are the kids, because kids will be motivated to give their correct age, and parents will be motivated to identify themselves as being, I'm the parent in this house. So for kids who are under 13, who are not the subject of this particular question, we can default off all the settings and make it the parent's control point. They're the controller of turning things on or off. But then for teen users, they can get it and they can control those permissions themselves. Digital age of consent, though, wildly varies around the world. So if you're a company going, actually, I want to implement this system for teens, well, it's 13 in the UK, it's 14 in Spain, it's 15 in Denmark, it's 21 in Saudi Arabia, and maybe you also might need to have your husband's permission, right? So we can say we have these great aspirations that teens should be empowered, but actually doing that from a technological perspective has been super difficult. So if we can provide a tool that is, in this country, this is actually what a teenager is. These are the permissions that you actually have, and here's how you can really super easily get on and be empowered to be in control of your experience. I think that's hope. That's my optimism for the future, and that's what we're trying to bring through KID.
Thank you, Dave.
So, in the teen environments that we protect, one of the key things that we're always thinking about is making sure that an environment is expressive enough, because where it feels like there is filtering or expression, the user base will simply migrate to somewhere else and likely migrate to somewhere that is much less safe than the environment they're in. The second is that often the high harm behaviors that we're looking to detect, victims or people that are actually facing this problem don't know they're actually a victim until way, way later down the line. So a lot of the work we're doing is making sure that what we're detecting can be detected accurately, can be detected in the least invasive way possible, but also quickly enough that some intervention can be put in place, because a lot of the behaviors we're talking about, if we're talking about grooming behaviors or users who may be vulnerable, these aren't things that are being reported. Often nobody else is seeing it. Often the user themselves doesn't know that there is a problem. So there's no reports that come through on the user reporting. You know, the impact of this thing may be in the real world, or it may be down the road where, you know, then we're dealing with even larger issues around people being extorted because of images they've sent, or other issues where, the user did not foresee this thing to come. Now, we can then kind of go into the other conversation around, well, what do we need to do in terms of education for these things so people can be resilient or kind of aware of these things. But we want to make sure that we can spot these things without users themselves having to know that they're a potential victim or a potential target of the problems.
Glenn?
So I mean, Amazon Kids is available for under 13s, but I think the one thing I hope that we're doing is really teaching kids those healthy digital habits, at a very young age. So they come in, if they use our device at 2 or 3 or 4, I think over time they're really going to understand, what is a healthy habit when it comes to screen time, or what type of content they should be using, making sure they're using a variety of content. It's not just gaming, it's not just watching videos, but it's actually reading books or listening to audiobooks or engaging with Alexa skills or actually engaging Alexa in a conversation that could be about learning or understanding how to do your maths homework, etc., etc. So I think hopefully instilling that in children at a very young age that they'll carry through to their teenage years. That's not to say that parents can't use, of course, Amazon Kids for any ages, but really it's the under 13.
Thank you. Yes, please.
I want to add one thing that teens keep talking to us about, which is the hypocrisy of their parents. So we're very focused on controlling their behavior and making sure we're managing everything, but then parents' regulation of screen time is something that they say it's hypocritical. And so I think that's a really important point as we think about the parenting materials that we put out there, as we think about the role modeling that we do, that we set the stage for how kids and teens use their devices as well, and they model that behavior. So that's one thing that comes through loud and clear, but they say it all the time. It's very hypocritical. Texting while driving, these types of things that they say, my mom does it. And such an interesting and important reminder that we may be focused on it as adults, but we also need to think about it, what we're modeling ourselves.
Thank you for the reminder, Mindy. I'm sure we
all need it, right?
Yeah. I definitely do. Teens are incredible at these workshops. we had all of these incredibly smart people around in the room, right? We had PhDs, we had like experts everywhere, and we had young people involved as well, and we would all come to these very, very smart conclusions. And there was this one young woman across the table, and she was just sitting there, and she was just shaking her head. And we asked her, well, what's going on in your head? She goes, that's not how we use it. That's just not how we use it. And it was just this aha moment. So, I mean, I think to all of your points, it's true. I want to talk, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about regulation. It is a wild field out there right now with all the three-letter acronyms from everywhere. But I want to get your perspectives on what does good regulation look like. I know that for Roblox, we are definitely supportive of sensible regulation. It must happen, and it needs to be sensible. But from your perspectives, I would love to hear your perspectives on what good regulation looks like.
This is the hot topic right now. I would say from our perspective, we want and we are supportive of risk-based approach to regulation that applies child development principles as you look at it. We've published a legislative framework, you can go read it online, that talks about the types of legislation that we are very supportive of, but risk-based is really important for us to understand what are the most egregious harms, how do we go about protecting against those, and how do we recognize the ages and stages that kids are in to make sure we're accurately and appropriately supporting them. I would also say, so much discussion right now is on age assurance and a number of other areas, the industry solutions are very important, and like industry standards and guidelines to help support us, because it's very difficult to manage the complexity, and I think you all know it even more, of all the regulation coming in, and having some standard bodies help here would be very beneficial, especially when thinking about some of the complexities of how you go about implementing this type of regulation.
Yeah, so I think just thinking back on the database that we have of all the applicable laws and regulations, over 200 jurisdictions, over 100,000 data points per country, that results in about 50 things a company needs to decide, are we turning this on or off for this user in this jurisdiction, where there's a more developed legislative framework. For me, the fundamental shift, which actually is why I have such optimism for the future, is the perspective of regulation in products online, in products offline, was the laws apply for the audience that you're targeting. And so all services would say, well, we're a general audience, we're for adults, we're aiming at adults, so we're going to design our service for adults, and we'll deal with the kids later. But the Federal Trade Commission, in their ruling against Epic Games, the law changes in privacy law and in online harms law, and this will have a domino around the world, essentially says if children are likely to access your service, you have to be able to identify them, and you have to modify your service to make it appropriate for their age. And if you think about that, that is a huge paradigm shift of the internet. And that is about making a safer internet. It's about making the internet, it's about having a safer internet. That is safety by design. That is, if kids are likely to access your service, you have to be able to make your service appropriate to them. And coming back to the fundamental rights is you're not allowed to turn them away. You do not have a right of refusal of service to them. You have to be able to make your service age appropriate. And for companies, that's super difficult. For regulators, it's super difficult to get the framework right. And we have a little bit of this gap in my estimation, which is, for once the law is slightly ahead of the technology. The aspiration, ambition of the law essentially means you're going to have to age identify or have an age assurance, a signal from somewhere that doesn't have to be perfect, but just good enough. Risk-based, if you're going on a video sharing site which has high levels of content filtering and identifies all the bad stuff, so it's unlikely that the layperson will see it anyway, something more than a date of birth, but certainly not providing your government-issued ID would be appropriate. So it's about proportionality, but we do have this interesting delta between how are we actually going to reach that aspiration, which is also, again, where we try and help, but I'll try not to be too much of a shill.
David, or you know what? Just to be crazy, Glenn, let's have you go first.
Yeah, I think I can be quick. I think it's really important to keep that dialogue open between regulators, the tech community, but also the important work that not-for-profits are doing, like FOSI and Internet Matters and Connect Safely. It's making sure that we're having those open dialogue and discussions about really how can we innovate together, to make sure that we're not stifling innovation, but make sure we're developing the right experiences to really protect children from harm, and also give parents the tools that they need.
Thank you. So, amazing timing. We have 10 minutes for questions. So I'd like to have you all think about some questions that you would like to ask, and then I will close it up with just one quick final question for all of you. Who would like to ask a question?
Hi all, thanks so much for this wonderful panel. I'm Mike, I'm from Modulate. We do voice moderation primarily for online games. For all kinds of safety tech, whether we're talking moderation or age assurance or other kinds of tools, it all comes with a baked in arms race effectively. There's always a little bit of that battle, sometimes against active adversaries, sometimes just against kids that want to get on that platform and don't care to go through your age assurance portal or something like that. Some ways to engage with that arms race are just sort of trying to win in the short term, but knowing it's going to iterate. But I think there's been a lot of great innovation in the last few years on how to start transcending the arms race and put together tools that can actually sort of win in some real sense. So I'd love to hear some of you talk about the techniques that you use to actually transcend that arms race and find ways that prevent those bad actors or just sort of unintentional actors from working around the system in the same way.
Somebody like to take that?
So there's a few ways of doing this, and this is what we spend a lot of time, a lot of resource on. Some of it is about layering some of those signals together. A lot of the things that people are trying to do, you can't spot necessarily with a single data point. So actually spotting multiple things that look problematic to tell us that there is a problem. Because a lot of the time, the real question is how do you pull the needle from the haystack in the environment? The other thing that we do that we spend a lot of time on is looking at the places where we may get a signal of where somebody has come up with a technique or is describing what they're doing to allow us to understand what's going on. So in darker communities, we will see people talking about the technique for, well, here's how you get into this space and do that bad thing that you want to do. Or here's an exploit that we found where you may be able to run this on an environment. And actually, finding those things can be very helpful, not only for the platform they're directly talking about, but other platforms where they may be exposed to the same problem, but nobody's tried it out yet. So I talked about the kind of intelligence work we do. A lot of that intelligence is letting platforms know where either they're directly at risk or they may be at risk. And if we talk for an hour of generative AI, that's a place where people are looking for exploits and loopholes on all of those solutions where they may be trying it over here, but actually if you own the platform over here, you may be at risk down the road. So yeah, absolutely an arms race of trying to find these things out.
Anybody else have a comment on that? I would also add that as an industry player, we also collaborate with other industries as well. We work very closely with Google and Microsoft to share information and to utilize best-in-class features to make sure that our platforms remain innovative and advanced. So in that case, there are some things that are not necessarily competitive, but very collaborative. Does anybody else have a question? It's a quiet group.
We fixed the internet.
We have fixed it all. You're all experts. Congratulations.
They want lunch, Chair.
I realize that we're between you and lunch. So, okay, if there are no other questions, because there is a question.
Hello, my name is Rafael. I'm a student in finance, and so you talked about regulations. So I wanted to ask, when you talk about regulations, are you talking about it on the national level, or on the European level, or also like on the company's level? So what are you talking about? Could you clarify it more?
Yeah, I can
Luke,
jump
please.
on that. We're talking about regulation or laws that may be state level, all the way up to kind of international, European-wide or statewide. And I think, having had a moment to reflect on your question about what does good regulation look like, and Mike's question as well, is we do need these overarching global principles that set frameworks of common understanding. Those are then, you know, and the rights of the child is a good example of a set of principles and frameworks that should be applied globally. I know that not everyone applies them exactly, but they're a good example of a global framework. And then countries reflect those in their national laws, and those national laws are culturally appropriate. And the age of digital consent is an example of that, where it varies, you know, in Europe between 13, 14, 15, 16. But there are other countries in the world that just simply don't have a legislative framework, have a strong youth base, and that's where companies can step in actually and say, regardless of there being a legislative gap, this is actually how we apply a global framework, and this is how we want to be proactive in protecting people using our services as well. So it's a bit of a mix between the company's principles, global principles, and trying to apply the national regime, which can be incredibly difficult to do. Big companies struggle with it, which is an area where we've tried to step in and plug that gap. And I think the link to Mike's question is, there's a risk that you set up a framework and say, we will use this technology, and this technology is the solution. Until recently, there was European law that still required businesses to have a fax machine, right? Because it was mandated in a piece of legislation in the 90s. My approach that I would recommend to regulators is actually just to have a constant evaluation of best available techniques. It's a common system used in the building industry, but we should be applying that across technology as well, to make sure we have the latest and greatest available techniques. A company can't rely on, well, 5 years ago we used this tool and we've been using the same one for 5 years, when technology is moving far quicker than that. So that's, I think, how we link keeping up with technology whilst maintaining global principles that are nationally, culturally relevant.
Thank you. So, because we are between these kind people and lunch, I'm going to move us along very, very quickly. In one sentence, very quickly, and I'm going to start with you, Glenn, because you're at that end, so get ready. You ready? Okay. Yeah, I'm ready.
I'm ready.
What are you most excited about in regards to innovation in the next year, 2 years?
Well, I think mine's going to be particularly lazy, but generative AI, I think I'm just so excited about what that's going to mean for both really fun experiences for kids, but also like what it can do for parents when it comes to like setting up parental controls and actually managing their child's experience.
So I'm going to say the same thing. If we can get a 4 for 4, we'll see how we get on. But generative AI in terms of how can we use it to build new detection techniques? Also interesting to me from how is it going to be abused and what are we going to see in terms of the threat landscape? But also, I think importantly across not only just this space, but generally, what is it going to take away that allow us to innovate? What time is it going to free up in general tasks that actually allow us to innovate with something that may not be generative AI? What's it going to give us in terms of resource? That I think that's the real value that we're going to see from it.
My first thought was GTA 6, but I guess that's not what you're looking for. No, look, I think about my kids when I think about that question, and it is the ability for them to go online, and as they grow up, they get access to the appropriate levels. We talked about this 3, 6, 9, 12 thing earlier. I think that's a great example. And the technologies will be available to make sure those experiences open up as the children grow as well.
I'm similar to the others on the thread here, but generative AI, but I'm actually very interested in the space of where parents are struggling. We've heard this on the panel before this. We've heard it here today. Parents struggle getting access and understanding the parental controls and how do they get set up in a more seamless way. And I think that's a really interesting intersection and power of the technology. So that plus for teens, generative AI and learning. And I think there's a lot there that is just yet to be tapped, and I think there is great potential.
Okay, so that's 5 for 5, because I agree with you with the excitement of genAI, and I would also say I'm also optimistic that we're having this conversation. We wouldn't even have this conversation in terms of the importance of digital citizenship and making sure that people had a self-awareness regarding the relationships with technology, and now it's available to us. And with that, I'm ending 9 seconds early. So have a wonderful lunch, everyone. Thank you to all the panelists.